Pretty good? Okay. So we're going to proceed that I'm not going to use a microphone. Well, we have another beautiful day. Raining yet again one more time. I saw a cartoon yesterday about it was a boat pulling a corn planter through a field. And I have a small boat, so I might have to see, maybe I could rent that out this spring. But let's not hope for that. We've got a new spring coming. We're going to have a beautiful spring. That's what we are going to hope for. And with that, we're going to talk a little bit about soil health this morning as we get ready to move into spring and start doing our cropping systems. So with soil health, its life on Earth does depend on our soils, because from growing plants to preserving waterways to supporting life, it's all about the soil. It's with the crops we grow, the streams we're protecting, the animals that we're using in our operations. So it's the uppermost surface of what we walk on. It's what we're putting our crops on. It mainly consists, soil, of organic matter and minerals, water, and gases. And it does serve as the basis for plant life. With no soil, there's no plant life. So as we, as farmers and producers, work to increase our yields, we need to consider our soil, because without that we wouldn't have the ability. So very, very important to maintain soil health. There's a lot of areas in the world where soil is damaged, from deforestation in other countries, even a little bit in this country, to large urbanization. That all can affect soil. And the building of roadways, infrastructure, all that can damage soil from the standpoint of creating compaction, where we tend to get maybe more runoff or soil loss. I don't know if you can recognize this picture. It's a local picture, kind of. South of here, it's the Conowingo Dam, down right at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. This is a picture from August of this year. You might remember in August we had some pretty heavy rain events. It is a hydroelectric dam, which is over here on this side. These gates, they open only when there's enough pressure behind the dam from high water events. And that's what it looked like in August. There's an issue with the Conowingo Dam and other dams in our area here in the Susquehanna River. This particular dam forms a lake that goes 14 miles north. It's now full of sediment. Whenever they have to do an additional discharge from high water, it's a lot of sediments going into the Chesapeake Bay. Exelon is the company that owns that, and they're in discussions with Pennsylvania and Maryland as to who is going to help them with the sediment, because there's approximately estimated 31 million cubic yards of sediment in that lake. If you take 31 million cubic yards of sediment and lay it out 6 inches deep, it would cover over 35,000 acres. That's about 50 square miles. So this dam is 90 years old, and in 90 years, 50 square miles of soil 6 inches deep has been deposited behind that. So have we had soil erosion issues? Yes. Do we still have? Yes. It's a picture from up in New York this year, where there was a heavy rain event that caused some severe flooding. So when we get events like that, we do get some damage. So it's all about soil conservation and increasing the soil's ability to hold and maintain organic matter or carbon, because it's that reduce of carbon that has the overall health on the earth. And it is one of the most important physical factors of life. It's the primary nutrient for plant growth. In plants, it makes up a large portion of organic matter. It makes up 20% of you and me and the animals that we have. It makes up 50% of plants. It's the 5th most abundant gas in the atmosphere that we breathe, carbon dioxide. Who wants to take a guess? What are the 2 main gases that we're breathing in and out right now? Any guesses?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen. What's the other one?
Oxygen.
You got them in the right order. Very good. It's 78% of the air we breathe is nitrogen.
I was going to say, we couldn't hear that back here.
Nitrogen and oxygen. 78% of the air we breathe is nitrogen, 20% is oxygen. There's a little bit of water vapor. There's some other inert gases like argon and that. And then we have carbon dioxide. So carbon, really important for what it makes up in our world, from you and I to plants to even in the air we breathe. When we think about building organic matter, we're actually sequestering carbon. We're taking carbon and putting it into the soil. And we can use plants to do that by capturing sunlight and building root systems and turning that material into the ground. We can use cover crops to keep the cover soiled at all times. And we can try and control physical disturbances, especially because when we disturb soil, we're going to start losing carbon. And we want to try and combine cropping systems and grazing systems, whatever possible, to try and build organic matter. When we till, we lose carbon. When we aerate the soil through tillage, we induce air into the soil, which causes microbes to actually reduce the amount of carbon. They burn it off. When we're no-tilling and doing high residue management, that's where we're gaining carbon or building organic matter. So whether we say building carbon or building organic matter, it's the same thing, because carbon makes up a huge portion of that organic matter. In soils that are unfertilized, like some of the prairie soils we had years ago, it's organic matter that keeps the nitrogen there, that has a source for them to use nitrogen. It's organic matter that breaks down, that in unfertilized soils, that's where they get their nitrogen. It supplies plants with phosphorus and sulfur. It improves soil structure by increasing the aggregation of the soil, making sure it forms into nice formation and particles which promote aeration, infiltration of water, and percolation of water down through. It's important for the soil's cation exchange capacity. As we increase soil cation exchange capacity, we increase the ability of the nutrients in the soil to flow easier to the plants. It helps increase water. We know organic matter in soils helps the water holding capacity of soil. It increases the ability at which soils can hold and maintain water. It helps mobilize micronutrients. It reduces soil erosion, again, by allowing water to percolate in rather than run off. It is a big food supply for the microbes in the soil, the biology that's going on. And of course, when we have nutrients in an organic matter form, they are not readily leached into the soil. The soil has the ability to hold on to them longer. So if we're working with soils that have problems with infiltration or drainage or low organic matter, we can't solve our way by tilling them. Because whenever we till the soil, we're going to continue to reduce organic matter. We're not going to increase it. So you can't till your way out of a soil issue. And the soil itself, it's not a machine, it's an ecosystem. It has life inside of it. It's not only what's above the ground, but it's all these microbes and bacteria and that live below the ground. And continuing to use cover crops, sequester and build organic matter as carbon, and use crop diversity is what we want to try and do. A lot of these soil organisms we can see, like some of the insects, the millipedes. One I don't have up there is, of course, earthworms. But there's also a lot of fungi and bacteria that we can't see that make up a lot of that soil life that's important for the healthy soil. If we can keep the biology of the soil working real well, soils, if we could remove and take all of the bacteria, the fungi, the earthworms, all that kind of nematodes and protozoa, and put that together, we would have about 7 to 15 tons of biology per acre in a good, healthy soil. So that's a lot, and that's what we're trying to do. And sequestering carbon, building organic matter is going to really help promote those microbes and those other microbiology underneath the soil. So it's all about improving soil. Good soil tilth, aggregation, healthy soil.
You got a question over here, Tracy?
Yes, sir.
What depth is that functioning in? Your weight right there, that's 7.75 to 15 tons?
Right.
You're talking 6 to 12?
It's going to vary a little bit in soils, but generally we are talking in like the main up 12 inches or so. Of course, in our upper layer of the soil, we tend to have higher organic matter levels as debris from cropping systems work their way into the soil.
If you're no-tilling, does your root dictate that, much like if somebody was small boarding? Like, I know those are two.
There's a little bit that's involved with that. Also, the soil life. Earthworms can do a lot at helping bring things like that down through their channels and that. So yes, yes. So here's kind of a poor drawing, but let's pretend this is a plant root. And out in the soil here, we have all these nutrients that it's looking for. We have some potassium, sulfur, potash. But we can get actually, with the soil life that's in the soil, a collaboration, or working together of plant roots and funguses. And the funguses will actually attach to the plant roots and spread out through the soil, which actually enhances the ability of the plant itself to have more access to water and nutrients. And what we're talking about primarily is mycorrhizae. It is a valuable organism. It is a fungus, and it establishes what they call a symbiotic relationship with plants. That it can help as it attaches to the roots of different vegetables, flowers, plants that regrow, and even trees. It sends out filaments called hyphae, and they can actually spread 200 times further than a normal root system will and transport nutrients and water back to that plant. It can help it, especially with phosphorus, transmit that back to that plant so that plant can have phosphorus. So this fungus is doing all this work for the plant, but it only asks for one thing from the plant in return: a little bit of glucose. So all it needs is a little bit of sugar. And it's happy to do that for the plant's root systems. That extended feeding area, it makes the soil healthier because we have that mycorrhizae in there. We get better root formation. We can see better disease resistance. Mycorrhizae is so important that if you've ever planted any of our King's perennial grass seed mixtures like sail topper, creekside, hillside, any of those mixtures, we include a product in there called myco seed treatment, or MST. And part of that MST that's in there does include a mycorrhizae fungi. Very important for helping the plants have better access to moisture, larger root systems, also helps with the aggregation of soil. So that mycorrhizae fungi is very important. This was from a couple years ago where we did a trip out to Ohio. This was, I believe it was some perennial ryegrass, where we looked at this plant here on one side of the field was planted without the addition of a mycorrhizae aid like the MST, and this plant was on the other side of the field that was. So it is a kind of a visual thing that you can see. So this had the mycorrhizae benefits to it, and this one did not. So longer, deeper root system. Another example of how a mycorrhizae fungi association with roots can look like. There's one without. This would be more in a forestry situation. This is a little pine tree. And you can see here when you get the mycorrhizae how much further it can spread and give that plant root more access to nutrients and water. So cover crops is an age-old practice that we use that can help build soil organic matter. It can help put carbon in the soil. It's going to help improve soil physical properties. It's going to help improve the resistance to erosion. It's going to benefit all this biology we were talking about so far, and including the sequestering and storing of carbon, and help with the formation of the mycorrhizae. And we can do that with cover crops. And a lot of monoculture cover crops have been used in the past. things like rye, wheat, a lot of our winter grains, very simple cover crops. Some are taken as forage, some are used strictly more as a cover. But in recent years, we're hearing more and more about multi-diverse cover crops. Very important that the addition of different species together, we get more benefits than the use of just a single monoculture or a single crop. The benefits of some of these complex mixes are that we do get mixed rooting structures. If we're working with just a small grain, we have a fibrous root system. If we can take and add other components to a cover crop that have different tap roots, different types of rooting structures, we can enhance the root mass down there in the soil and build more organic matter. A lot of times also with this mixed rooting structure, we can improve the ability to reduce compaction. We can also increase what's called root exudates. Root exudates are compounds that come out of the roots of plants, and they can be many different types. They can be sugars, amino acids, enzymes, and we're going to hear a lot more work about these root exudates as time goes on, because they can do a lot of things for plants. They can help with increasing the ability of fertility in the soil. They can maybe enhance the growth of plants. They may have the ability to reduce weed competition. So these root exudates we're going to hear a lot more about. Other benefits from multi-species cover crops with various types of root systems is we get more biodiversity. We can mobilize nutrients. We can reduce nutrients loss via leaching. We can enhance the landscape. Sometimes we use these as crops for bee nectar or honeybees. And we can also add a lot of beneficial insects habitat for them. We are very proud at King's AgriSeeds to be working with a company from Germany called DSV that has a cover crop program that you're going to hear more about through us called TerraLife. We have been using DSV as a resource for seeds for several years, primarily using some of their forage and legumes, forage grasses and legumes, but we're excited about their new cover crop program called TerraLife. The challenges in cropping systems all over the world are still the possibility of stagnating or declining yields, nutrient losses. Days like today with the weather we've had all fall, we have concern about nutrient losses. There's a lot of leaching going on down through the soil right now with all this rain. Increased emergence of disease, parasites, weed pests, reduction of organic matter, tendency to lose soil aggregation and soil formation. We're still seeing erosion by soil, by wind and water. Of course, the picture I showed earlier of the Susquehanna River this year. And on my way to King's, most mornings I crossed the Route 30 bridge, and starting about June, there was more mornings that river was muddy than clear. So we're still getting a lot of erosion.
Do you know how much of that they've been on agriculture?
No, I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's certainly, you're right, that's a good point. It's not all agriculture. As in some of the other pictures I showed with construction, things like that, they're trying to reduce that. And a lot of times when you go into a construction area, you know, there are plans, there are procedures in place that they have to put in place to try and reduce as much soil erosion as possible. But some of that, primarily, a large of the bulk is still agriculture. Does any of these pictures look familiar from this year? Soil compaction, I mean, wheat and barley, there was areas it was tough to get off. Certainly a lot of cornfields look like that. That's actually a field in New Holland. That was a soybean field. That picture was taken, I think, right after Christmas. You can see the soil damage through ruts. You can see we're starting to get some soil loss here, soil movement already. Consequences of soil compaction, like in those pictures, is we lose that capillary action for water to infiltrate into the soil. And then we tend to get more runoff and movement of soil. Also for plant roots, if we have compaction, we lose the ability to get root depth, which is going to limit that plant's ability to access to nutrients and water. Now, when I made this presentation back in November, we were on record for like the second wettest year, but that has changed. We now had the wettest year in this local area here based on the weather station down at Millersville University. Have you all heard that? That's the wettest year ever? We had more rain this year than we did in '72 when Agnes came through. And Agnes came through that year, we had about 58 inches. This year we were over 60. We had 26 Fridays of rain or snow in 2018. And we also had about I think it was 143 cloudy days. It's a wonder our crops could grow at all with all that rain and all that cloud. We saw very little sunlight. We had silage that got too dry because the fields were too wet. We rutted fields up. We did a tremendous amount of soil compaction in a lot of these fields. And we know compaction weakens all aspects of soil, from the infiltration of water and nutrients to the uptake by previous crops. Nutrient cycling, it's going to reduce yields. Compaction is going to be an issue. So what do we do now? Well, we know that as we go into fields and we increase the axle weight, our compaction is going to go down further into the soil as we increase load on the axle. We also know that if we get on a field, the wetter it is, even if we keep the weight the same, the wetter the field, the deeper the compaction goes. So what do? Well, first of all, we have to figure out where the damage is. We might think that hooking up to that ripper and blowing a bunch of black smoke is going to fix all our problems. And it may not, because we got to find out how deep the compaction goes. Back to that field in New Holland, it looked like those ruts were about this deep. That compaction is going to start, not the top of the soil here, it's going to start at the bottom of that rut and go down from there. So let's say we have compaction that goes down 36 inches and our ripper only goes down 24. That's not going to solve our problem. So, and freezing. If we hope that we're going to get a real cold winter and we're going to freeze the soils and get a big frost line down there, and then when that's going to relieve our compaction, that's not going to work either. Enough research has been done that shows that even compacted soils, when they're frozen for a longer period of time, once they thaw out, they go back to almost the same density. So freezing isn't going to help either. We need to use a multi-system approach of targeted tillage. First of all, some of these fields, you can't plant them the way they're rutted up, so they're going to have to be smoothed out a little bit. We're going to have to maybe use some deep tillage in certain areas, but we can also look at a crop rotation, including fibrous and deep-rooted cover crops, to start to rebuild the soil structure and break up that compaction. And we should work on the worst fields first, because those are the ones that are going to give us the issues first or have the greatest impact for reduced yields. And the hardest thing is going to be patience. Some of these fields that we've rutted up and damaged, it may take several years before we really start to see them come back into shape again. So it's going to take patience. There is a newsletter. Tom Kilser is a crop advisor up in New York. He puts out a weekly or a monthly newsletter. His November one was called Getting Out of Rutsville. It has a lot more information about things that you can do to help target some of these fields that got rutted up. Here's his address. He has a website. He has listed on his website all of his articles that go back for like 2 or 3 years. Back in 2016, there's another article in there about compaction issues. So if you want to see some more information, that would be a good place to go. And you can get access to that. But the keys to handling a lot of these challenges, including soil compaction, building organic matter, it's that healthy biological active soil. That's what we need. That's what we're looking for. So when we have no diversity, or we use just a monoculture cover crop, we may miss some opportunities. Certainly if we use just a small grain like rye or wheat, we may have had the chance to maybe fix some nitrogen if we would have included a legume like crimson clover. When we use monoculture cover crops, depending which one we use, we may not get as much rooting depth. Depends on the type that we use. So the advantage for improvement is this diversity of different cover crops with various types of root systems in combination working together. And that's an example of one there, dug out of the field. Now you can dig a lot of roots, but a lot of times we lose those real fine roots that you can't see as well. So here's some of these root boxes. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these at maybe some of your summer field days and shows. But just to give you an example, this is the maximum that you can get, because in these root boxes are usually put pretty nice soil, but it still helps you give a description of how that root system is going to function. And this one here is a spring pea. This would be linseed. Here is a Daikon radish. Now the taproot part must be on the other side of the box a little bit more, but you can still see, even with a Daikon radish, you get a pretty fibrous root system off that big taproot. This is an oil seed radish, which is a little bit different than a Daikon. This plant is Phacelia, which is often used as a nectar crop for honeybees, but can be used in cover crop situations because of its very fine fibrous root system. This would be an example of like a fodder cabbage, and then a winter grain here like oats or rye. So at DSV, what we're excited about is the knowledge that they're bringing on putting together diverse cover crop mixtures. And they've actually, here's 21 different cover crops. They're actually looking at how they root in the soil. How deep do they root? This is in centimeters, so at 30 centimeters, figure that's about a foot. Most of these cover crops have the main root mass, which is in that orange color, is in the top 12 inches. But you can see there's some of these, which aren't legumes and some that are, that have roots that can go much deeper than that. And it's the ability of DSV working with a lot of these cover crops, finding out how their root systems work together, that they can come up with these diverse cover crop mixtures. They're also looking at special properties. Now, I know that you can't see this, it's on the slide, but there's several cover crops species going across the top. And down on this side, they've actually listed what they call special properties. And they'll take a cover crop and list out what special properties it has. So let's take one like we know of, like buckwheat. And we know that buckwheat is one that mobilizes phosphorus. We know that it also works pretty well in drier conditions for germinating. We know that it's very fast establishing, and that it works as one that can be seeded later and still get benefits. So some of these other components that they're using for some of these other cover crops that they're listing, they're looking at rooting structures, whether they root shallow or deep, whether they got tap roots or fibrous roots, do they fix nitrogen, do they mobilize phosphorus, do they help with the formation of mycorrhizae, do they have alleliopathic effects, do they have long vegetative phases, are they good for bees, do they help reduce water content in soil like a dehumidifying procedure. So they take a lot of these cover crops and they're putting these special properties down. And at DSV they have 17 different cover crop mixes. Right now they're selling in Europe. We decided to look at 6 this year. We took 6 of the 17 and put them into some mixtures and trials. So of the 6 that we're testing and evaluating, we did offer 3 for sale this fall. And we have 3 again for sale this year. And we'll probably add to it. So the first one is called Betamax. And this one, and again, these are multi-diverse cover crops. This one has in it, it's going to be like a winter oat, common vetch, berseem clover, field peas, phacelia, and linseed. So it's got a pretty diverse cover crop mixture of different species. Some of these are legumes, some are grasses like the oats, and it's the ability of these root systems together that has a beneficial effect. And this one does not have any radishes in it. You'll notice there's no tillage radishes, there's no kind of other oilseed radishes in it. So this one, they're targeting specifically in Europe for sugar beets, because you don't want to have brassicas following brassicas in a rotation. For here in the US, this would be a great cover crop for vegetable growers. especially if they're going to be growing brassicas like red beets or cabbage or broccoli. So it's a great cover crop for those. Also can be a great cover crop for corn or cereals. This one, all these components I talked about in there are going to freeze off. So this one will winter kill totally. So there won't be much left in the spring. Should be nothing there in the spring. The big thing that's in this that makes this kind of unique is there's common vetch in here, which is different than the hairy vetch that we normally grow. Hairy vetch actually overwinters in our area. Here this common vetch doesn't, but it has a beneficial effect on soil bacteria, which is kind of interesting. This cover crop is going to help increase soil tilth, and again, it's a great cover crop when going into vegetable producers because it doesn't have those radishes in it. So we're excited about the Betamax. And there's an example of some of the different roots that were in there. Again, these were dug out of our plots. You can see there's some species there with tap roots, some with fibrous roots. So we're getting that combination of different rooting structures together.
Question, Mac.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if a cover crop like that would help something like rootworms in organic corn after corn.
As of right now, that particular species, a mixture, I would say, is not going to help with rootworms at this time. We may have some other cover crops coming here that possibly will, but that one, I don't believe that's going to help with the reduction of rootworm issues. So this next cover crop is called Rigel DT. This is another one that is going to totally winter kill. This one is the one that really is effective in penetrating compacted soils. That's the whole idea behind this Rigel DT. It helps with numerous root channels because of the rooting depth of the different species that are in it, and really helps improve soil penetration so that the previous crop can get through compacted soils. It also has a low carbon-nitrogen ratio. Carbon-nitrogen ratio means as this is decomposing in the soil, because it has a low carbon-nitrogen ratio, any nitrogen that's in the soil, which is an energy source that the bacteria use to break it down, they're not going to use a lot of nitrogen. This one decomposes quickly, easily. So it has a low carbon-nitrogen ratio. Some of the components in this Rigel DT mix are some new things we haven't heard of before. Abscisian cabbage. It's got some winter oats. It's buckwheat, there is berseem clover, linseed, Persian clover, phacelia, sunflowers, and tillage radishes. So this does have the radishes in. It does have a little more diversity, and this was a great cover crop mix for compacted soils if we're going to go back into maize or cereals or even any kind of legumes. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm going to go back just a couple slides to give you an idea. This Betamax, we're seeding that at about 40 pounds to the acre. And all these cover crops, these 3 cover crop mixtures I'm talking about, these are going to do best seeded at the end of summer. These are not going to do well seeded late, like in October. These are cover crops that need the ability to have a couple weeks of growth to put on biomass and do the job that they need to do. So this Betamax, 40 pounds of the acre, basically anytime end of July through August is a great time to seed it. And I'm going to show you some pictures of these mixtures in just a second. The Rigel DT, this one has a little bit lower seeding rate. It's about 20 pounds to the acre. Again, late July through the end of August, great time to seed this cover crop. Again, this one is the one very good at penetrating compacted soils. Our third cover crop that we have available through the TerraLife, this one is called Maize Pro. This is for corn. This one's different. This is not going to totally winter kill. There will be some material that will carry over through the winter. This one, very, very balanced and intensive for corn rotations. This one does help support the formation of the mycorrhizae we talked about. We get a more intensive root penetration, better water holding capacity in soil, and the components that are in this mixture are Alsite clover, crimson clover, we have field peas, linseed, Persian clover, there's actually sorghum in this, sunflowers, tillage radishes, winter rye and winter vetch. So really a diverse cover crop mix. And this one's about 40 pounds to the acre as a seeding rate. And again, around the end of July through August is a great time to seed this. And again, this one is being specifically targeted for corn.
Are you going to test any of those? Say we've got that soybean field from New Holland, and you're normally double cropping and getting your corn in May after small grains. But you've got that field. Are you going to test with our longer growing season than many, putting that in as soon as frost quits, like you could get early corn in? If you gave that 30 days and then you put that under 30 or 45 days later, is there any way in our climate you could get a benefit on the springtime for, say, 2019 year?
Right. These are mainly, these cover crops here are mainly for late summer establishment. We will have some other cover crops that can be used in the spring, but remember in the spring, soil is cold. And things go a lot slower. When we're planting these like later in the season, even though we get cooler temperatures in the fall, the ground's warm. I'm going to show you some pictures how these are going to do. So I would say for what your purpose would be trying to plant these in the spring in a short period of time, probably not going to be as successful. That we'd have to look at something else that's a little more better for the spring growing season. One of the things that information from DSV is they've actually done some trial work that shows that with planting corn after some of these cover crops, they were able to get an advantage with the Maize Pro versus some of the other cover crops. So it actually helped increase yield, and that's exciting. With the nutrient, especially nitrogen uptake of these cover crops, when we get multi-species and we can get a lot of biomass on the top, we can sequester and hold on to a lot more nitrogen too than something just like rye or maybe a small grain in the wintertime planted later. We can get a lot more nitrogen in the biomass above ground and also in the root systems from having a diverse species cover crop mix. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures real quick. This is some cover crop plots that we did down at the research farm. And we planted these on the 28th of August. And I'm going to show you these three mixtures. And I took pictures every week, and you can watch and see how they grow. And I took them up through about the end of November. So one of the things that we did do was right before the first frost came, we went through with a little forage harvester and actually harvested these cover crops to see how much biomass they could make. And some of the higher biomasses came out of some of the crop ones that we're selling, like this one is Maize Pro. That was the corn one we just talked about. Here's regular straight rye. Of course, rye, even planted in late August, till the first frost didn't have as much biomass on as what the Maize Pro did. Up here's the Rigel DT, and the Betamax was right over here. We also had in that we had some oats. Now, regular fall oats did pretty well at sequestering and building a lot of biomass above ground. But remember, that's a monoculture and doesn't have the ability maybe to take advantage of having some other cover crop species in there to fix nitrogen or help with compacted soils. So let's look at Betamax first. This was 1 week after planting. It's a 6-foot strip that runs right here. And I'm going to show you a picture every week after planting. So planted on August the 28th, so that's 1 week after. There's 2 weeks after, we're starting to see a little germination. 3 weeks after, our strip is starting to get a little better. 4 weeks, got a little bit of jump on growth. Again, this is Betamax. 5 weeks, a little more cover. 6 weeks, we get a pretty big jump. So remember that, 6 weeks, a pretty good jump here. We can see some of the winter oats in here, the winter peas, some of the vetch that's in there, that's in the Betamax. You can see that coming along. In week 7, this was when we were just getting ready to get a frost. The first light frost was going to come through. And here you can see where we went through with our forage harvester. We actually did a cross here and up at the top. And Taylor actually helped me do that. So that's where we got those biomass weights. So we had a light frost on the 7th week. We went into the 8th week and things continued to grow. So 9 weeks after planting, we're still, things are growing. We've had some cold temperatures, but not anything really low temperature yet. But after the 9th week, we did. That's week 10. And you can see here on some of these other cover crops that this one wasn't as affected as much, because this one does have more of a winter oat in it that didn't freeze out as hard yet, but it probably will later. And then we get into week 11, and we're still waiting for this to kill down. But if I get down to the farm next week, I hope to take some pictures, and we'll see how these have deteriorated a little more since.
Still green as of today.
Still green as of today. Even the 8-degree temperatures on Monday and Tuesday didn't hurt it.
Maybe it just didn't turn brown yet.
Didn't turn brown yet. Okay. So this is the Rigel DT mix. So we'll do the same thing. Watch for week 6 and see what happens. So that's 2 weeks after planting. 3 weeks, you can see this one does have some tillage radishes in, some Daikon radishes. So you can see they're very fast emerging. They're very quick merging. And 5 weeks, and boom, we get into 6 weeks, we get a pretty big jump. Or excuse me, that's 6 weeks. So a lot of cover in there. We got some sunflowers showing. There's our 7th week where we took a little bit of a harvest. There's 8 weeks. We're still getting the sunflowers growing. And you can see the radishes here, some of the vetch. Down here, there's a little bit of brown. I know you probably can't see it, but that's the buckwheat. That did get burnt out. And there's week right before the heavy frost. And then there's where we got the heavy frost on week 10. So you can see that did take out some of the sunflowers and some of the other products. And I would imagine that this one still has some green in it, doesn't it, down there? Tim? A little bit yet. So this is the Maize Pro. This is the last one. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3, 4, 5. Here's the sorghum. You can see that, and this one has sorghum in it. Week 6, we get a big jump. Week 6. 6 weeks on both these, at least this year. On the 6th week is when we got the biggest jump of biomass. They continue to grow into week 7. That was right before the frost. Here we had the light frost. That's week 8. You can see it did nip the sorghum a little bit. The sunflowers are still hanging in there. There's week 9, still hanging in there. Week 10, then we had a heavier freeze. And that took out the sunflowers and the sorghum, and that was the 11th week. So we can build in about 6 or 7 weeks a good bit of biomass, especially planted in late fall. And the earlier we plant, the more biomass we can build, the deeper these root systems are going to go. So the question is, if we're going into corn, after let's say we're getting ready, we're going to plant corn in the spring, and let's say the crop that's in the field now is wheat. When we take wheat off, do we put double crop beans in, or do we put a cover crop in that's going to enhance our corn crop? What's the trade-off? That's going to be the trade-off to think about. So what do we get on double crop beans? 20, 30 bushel maybe? Some years we might be a break even. Could we do better with a cover crop in a situation like that? The other thing I wanted to mention is with DSV's experience and expertise in putting together multi-species cover crops, we at King's AgriSeeds, we can pat ourselves on the back because we had some of these already in the lineup. We have Raised Crazy Mix, which, how many here have ever heard of Raised Crazy or using it, growing it? It's a great forage, isn't it? But it's also, as a grazing crop, cover crop, break crop, smother crop, it's got cowpeas, sorghum sudan, daikon radishes, millet, sunflowers, brassicas. That's a great diverse summer crop. And that's a good summer cover crop. You were talking about planting something in the summer just as a cover, or to use as grazing or making baleage off of. Great mixture. Even our Raised Crazy fall mix, which could be planted more around the end of summer for a fall cover crop or a grazing crop. It's Austrian winter peas. There's oats in it, triticale, hairy vetch, crimson clover, Marshall ryegrass, and turnips. So again, a very diverse mix. That can be used, again, as a cover crop or as a grazing mixture. So very nice. We've had that available. We've had in our lineup Soil Builder Plus. It's a great forage in the spring. Triticale, crimson clover, hairy vetch, annual ryegrass, and some daikon radishes. Great as a forage, can also be used at a lower seeding rate as a very nice cover crop for the fall winter. Or even something as simple as our Triticale Plus, which is annual ryegrass and triticale. Great forage, but also can be used as a cover. Because we know ryegrasses do a great job at rooting deep and helping to promote soil tilth. So to finish up my presentation, soil health is nothing new. It's been around for a very long time. The quote on the top is from a Greek philosopher. His name was Xenophon, and he wrote a book in 400 BC, and I can't pronounce it, but it's something like Anakamisius is a book that he wrote way back in 400 BC. And one of his notes in there was, to be a successful farmer, one must first know the nature of soil. Second quote is from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our president. The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. What was happening when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president? What was going on in the Midwest with soil? The Dust Bowls, yes. And we know some of those Dust Bowls reached the whole way in here. And the last comment actually came from Charles Kellogg. He was also around during the Dust Bowl days, and he's recognized as probably one of the first big agricultural persons in the USDA to really push soil health and the priority of soil preservation. And his comment was essentially, all life depends on the soil. There can be no life with soil and no life without soil. They have evolved together. So with that, I'll take any questions and thank you for your attention.